I remember the first time I felt the stirrings of my soul, not as a thought, not as a moment wrapped in clarity, but as something much older and deeper than memory itself. It came to me quietly, like the echo of a voice I had forgotten I once knew. I was still young, perhaps no more than 10 or 11, with the sort of innocence that allows you to feel the world before you try to understand it. The house was still in darkness, the clay walls cool and silent, everyone else asleep. But something within me had already woken, and it wasn't a dream or restlessness. It was a pull, delicate but undeniable, as if some invisible thread had been tied around my chest and was leading me gently beyond the world I knew. I rose without questioning the urge, moved more by instinct than intention. I didn't light a lantern, nor did I take anything with me. I walked barefoot through the courtyard, the stones cool and damp beneath my feet, my breath coming slowly, deeply, without effort. The air was different at that hour, thinner, more honest, as though the veil between worlds had been lifted. Everything was hushed. Even the birds had not yet stirred. The moon was waning, hanging low and soft in the sky, and a faint blush of dawn pressed like a secret against the horizon. I made my way past the olive trees and through the orchard, until I found myself beneath the great plane tree, the one that had stood long before me, and would remain long after. I had sat beneath that tree many times before, played there as a child, sought its shade in the heat of summer, but this morning was different. I didn't sit to rest. I sat because something inside me told me to. My legs folded beneath me, my spine relaxed against its thick trunk, and I listened, not to the world outside, but to something stirring from within. There were no words in my mind. There was no desire to name, to seek, to question. Only presence. Only stillness. The tree behind me pulsed with a quiet life, and the earth beneath me hummed with a song too slow for the human ear to catch. In that silence, I felt something awaken, a presence that had always been there, yet which I had never fully noticed until now. At first, it felt like warmth, not of the body but of the space inside it, the kind of warmth that rises in the heart when you are deeply seen by someone, but this was no one else's gaze. It was my own soul turning toward me. I did not see it, but I felt it, like the soft breath of something ancient brushing against the curve of my being. It was not loud. In fact, it made no sound at all. But I knew, unmistakably, that I was not alone. Not in that moment, and not ever. I had always thought of myself as one body, one thought, one life. But beneath that illusion, there had always been two, myself, and the soul that quietly walked beside me, watching, waiting, loving in silence. This soul did not need to speak to be understood. Its language was older than words, more honest than thought. It didn't judge or instruct. It simply existed, calmly, like the moon above, like the deep waters of a well that had never once dried. And in its silence, I felt no emptiness. Quite the opposite, I felt full for the first time. I felt as though all the longing I had never known I carried was being held, not answered, but held, and in that holding, I was made whole. I did not cry, but if I had, the tears would have come not from sadness, but from a joy too large for my body to contain. A joy that came from finally meeting the friend I had carried within me all along. I don't know how long I stayed there. Time had no meaning in that place. The sun may have risen or not. The world may have shifted, but I remained, not out of choice, but because I was exactly where I was meant to be. My breath slowed to the rhythm of the earth, and in that quiet breathing, I felt the vastness of what I was part of. There were no teachings yet. No words carved in books or carried on lips. But already, the truth had taken root in me, that silence is not the absence of something, but the presence of something greater. And that the soul, the essence of who we are, is the most faithful companion of that silence. As I sat there, feeling that presence wrap around me like the warm breath of eternity, I realized that nothing I could ever possess, no accolade or knowledge or comfort, would matter more than this knowing. That I was not alone. That I had within me a stillness deeper than thought. And that this stillness, this soul, was the part of me that had never been born and would never die. In the days and years to come, I would forget this at times, caught in the noise of the world, the distractions of mind and ego. But the soul waits. It never leaves. It never raises its voice. It waits for you to sit again beneath your own tree, in your own silence, and to remember what has always been true. That morning was the beginning of a lifelong friendship. And though the world would later call me teacher, poet, mystic, I would always think of myself first as a listener. For it is only in listening that one hears the soul, and it is only in silence that the soul speaks. The river called to me as it always did, not with a voice that pierced the air, but with something softer, more intimate, like a memory that lives in the marrow, a familiarity that cannot be explained. I was older than the boy who had once sat beneath the plane tree in wide-eyed stillness, but not so old that I had unlearned the ways of wonder. Life had begun to press upon me then, the weight of study, the noise of scholarship, the complexity of relationships, the early stirrings of ambition. The world had grown louder, and I, like many others, had tried to match its volume with thoughts and opinions and explanations. But that morning, I woke before the sun and felt something in me had grown parched, not of water, but of quiet. I needed no scroll to tell me what I already knew. My soul was calling me again, and it was calling me back to the river. I walked without haste. The fields were cloaked in the delicate silver of pre-dawn light, dew clinging to each blade of grass like tiny lanterns catching the breath of the unseen. The ground beneath my feet was soft, as if the earth, too, had only just woken. I passed beneath olive trees whose crooked limbs reached out like ancient arms stretching toward the sky, and the breeze moved through them with reverence. Even the birds had not yet begun their songs. It was a silence not of emptiness but of expectancy, like a room waiting for a beloved guest to enter. And I, with each step, felt myself slowly shedding the noise I had carried for so long. Thoughts dropped away like leaves. The layers of identity I had worn, son, student, thinker, faded in the hush that stretched across the landscape. I was not becoming less, I was becoming more by being less tangled. When I reached the river, the sight of it undid me. It wound through the valley with such quiet majesty, not demanding attention, not insisting on its presence. It simply was. A mirror to the soul. The water, glass-like at first, shimmered with a stillness that reflected not only the sky above but the stillness I had nearly forgotten within myself. And beneath that shining surface flowed something more ancient than time, more steadfast than stone. There was movement, yes, but it was not hurried. There was power, but not aggression. There was life, but it did not need to announce itself. The river was content to be exactly what it was, and that, I thought, was the first true lesson of the soul. I stepped closer and lowered myself to the bank, the earth cool and damp beneath me. I placed my hands flat on the ground, grounding myself, and inhaled deeply. The air was laced with water and the scent of wild mint and soil. I closed my eyes, not to sleep or to withdraw, but to awaken in a different way. And then I sat, just sat. There was no effort, no intention to meditate or contemplate. I did not ask questions or seek visions. I simply sat and let the presence of the river wash through me. It was not long before the chatter of my thoughts, those unending ripples on the surface of my mind, began to slow. The noise of the world, the voices of others, the echo of my own expectations, began to soften, then disappear altogether. What remained was not silence as absence, but silence as fullness. From somewhere deep within, I felt my soul rise, not upward, but inward. It was not separate from me, but it had waited for this stillness to be felt. It did not come with fanfare, did not demand acknowledgement. It was there as it had always been, a soft, glowing presence nestled beneath all the layers I had mistaken for myself. And in that moment, it felt as though I had returned to the most sacred of rooms, a sanctuary built not of stone and arches, but of breath and being. The soul had no face, but it was familiar. It had no name, but I knew it. It did not speak, and yet its presence said everything. I have been here. I am here. I will always be here. I opened my eyes and looked again at the river. The current moved steadily, carrying leaves and bits of broken reed. I watched as my reflection twisted with each passing wave, a face shifting and reshaping with the slightest breeze. And I understood then that what I see is never what truly is. The surface always moves. The image always changes. But beneath the water, the river is whole. Beneath the reflection, the soul remains untouched. I leaned forward and placed my fingertips in the water, feeling the gentle pull, the cool embrace. It was not a moment of great revelation, it was something better. It was a reunion. A quiet, humble, perfect reunion between the self that speaks and the self that listens, between the man who walks and the soul that waits. The sun crept up slowly behind the trees, brushing the water with gold. Light filtered through the leaves above me, casting shifting patterns on the river's surface, dancing like words from a divine tongue I would never translate. The silence grew deeper then, not quieter, but more alive. I could feel its presence like a pulse in the air, as though the earth, the trees, the river, and I were all breathing together in unison. I was no longer observing the silence. I was the silence. I belonged to it, and it belonged to me. The soul, I realized, is not something we possess. It is what we are when everything else falls away. And so I stayed, unmoving, content to be breathed by the world. Time ceased to measure anything. I did not worry what others might think, whether they'd wonder where I had gone, or whether I was being productive or useful. None of those things mattered. In that moment, the only truth that existed was the simple, undeniable knowing that the soul and silence are lovers, and I was their child, born not to speak first, but to listen. Eventually, the sun rose high enough to warm my back. The birds began to sing, and the world resumed its hum. But I was not the same. Something had changed, or perhaps something had been remembered. I stood, slowly, and placed a hand over my heart. Not out of habit, but out of reverence. The river continued its journey, and so did I. But I walked differently now. Not faster or slower, but fuller. Every step felt grounded in that inner hush. I carried with me the quiet rhythm of the river and the knowing that I was never alone, not in thought, not in sorrow, not even in joy. My soul was there. My friend. My witness. My deepest truth. And it would speak again, always, in the sacred, wordless voice of silence. The caravanserai was alive in a way that could easily swallow a man whole. It heaved and shifted like a great beast, made not of flesh, but of movement, noise, desire. Donkeys brayed as they were pulled by ropes through tight alleyways, hooves clattering over the stones slick with dust and spilled water. The murmur of voices rose to a roar as merchants called out their goods, silks from Damascus, figs from Aleppo, pepper from the coasts of India, sandalwood, saffron, lapis beads. Everywhere there was motion, sound, heat. Children darted between the legs of travelers, their laughter high and wild, chased by scolding mothers and distracted fathers. Wheels screeched, sandals slapped the stone, men shouted over the price of sheep. It was a whirlpool of human will, each person swirling in pursuit of something: profit, rest, pleasure, escape. And within that great storm, I stood still. I had come here not as a merchant nor as a buyer. I had nothing to sell, and nothing I sought to possess. My reason for being there was more subtle, more difficult to explain, even to myself. I was not following a road to trade, but rather a road to understanding, though that road had become overgrown with the vines of thought, ambition, confusion. My body had walked to the caravanserai, but my soul was still somewhere far behind me, quiet and forgotten like a coat left hanging in a dark room. I felt that absence in my bones, an ache not born of pain, but of neglect. The farther I walked through the thick crowds, the more the noise seemed to press into me. Not just around me, but within me. I began to feel the echo of all those voices as if they had taken up residence inside my chest. It was more than mere sound. It was the weight of hundreds of inner worlds colliding, spilling over, an ocean of longings, fears, identities crashing against the fragile vessel of my awareness. A headache bloomed at the base of my skull. My breath shortened. I felt as if I were losing the edges of myself, becoming just another figure swept up in the fever of noise and movement. That was when I heard it. Or rather, did not hear it. Beneath all that sound, that torrent of noise and energy, there was something else, something still. It was not the silence of absence. It was not the silence of sleep. It was a presence. A hum. A stillness that did not retreat or hide but simply was, waiting beneath the surface like a pearl beneath turbulent waters. I felt it not with my ears, but with something deeper, something within me that had grown very quiet, very suddenly. It was as if a thin door had opened inside my chest, letting in a breeze from a garden I had forgotten I once lived in. I searched for a place to sit, away from the crush of bodies, but not removed. I didn't want to escape the world, I only wanted to feel it differently. To see if the silence I had felt would remain, even amidst the roar. I found a spot under a narrow arch, shaded and half forgotten, where broken crates and worn sacks leaned against the stone. I sat down slowly, cross-legged, with my back to the cold wall. I closed my eyes. The first few moments were difficult. The noise surged louder, as though angry at being ignored. I heard the arguments, the laughter, the stomping feet, the cursing of traitors, the chewing of men eating dates. My thoughts, too, rebelled, insistent, intrusive. Fragments of memories, ideas for poems, worries about whether anyone was watching me. But I did nothing to stop them. I let them pass through me like gusts of wind through a reed field. I did not follow them. I did not feed them. I simply stayed, breathing, feeling, listening. And slowly, I began to fall. Not downward, but inward. Into a stillness so deep, it had no bottom. Into a silence so vast, it could contain every sound and not be disturbed. My breath slowed. My thoughts softened. And in that quiet space, the presence returned. The same presence I had felt beneath the plane tree as a boy, the same I had met beside the river, it was here, too, in the dirtiest, loudest, most chaotic place I had known. My soul had come to sit beside me again. Not as a vision or a voice, but as a certainty, a familiarity older than time. It didn't speak, but its silence filled me like a warm light entering through the cracks of a cold house. It reminded me that it had never left, not even for a moment. I had wandered, but it had waited. And I understood something then that I had not before. The soul does not require silence around it to reveal itself. It is not something fragile that can only bloom in monasteries and deserts. No, it thrives in the heart of chaos. It waits in the market, in the tavern, in the screaming crowd. The silence of the soul is not the absence of sound, but the fullness of presence. It is the deep well that lies untouched beneath the surface of a rushing river. It is the eye of the storm where nothing moves and everything is known. I opened my eyes slowly. The world had not changed. The people still bustled, the merchants still argued, the caravanserai still pulsed with 1,000 desires. But I was no longer drowning in it. I was no longer looking through the noise, I was looking from the silence. And from that stillness, I saw them differently. Not as strangers, not as distractions, but as fellow wanderers. Each of them carried their own noise, their own burdens, their own forgotten soul. And I, who had remembered mine, could see them with a compassion that I had not known before. Their chaos no longer frightened me. It only reminded me of how long I, too, had wandered without listening. I stood up from the ledge and walked slowly back into the crowd. But I walked with a new rhythm now, not rushed, not hesitant. A rhythm that moved with the pulse of my breath and the hush of my soul. People brushed past me. Some glanced, some ignored, some mumbled greetings. I nodded, smiled, said little. I carried something with me that words could not hold. The silence walked with me like a second skin, like a shadow of light. And I knew then that I had found what I had been seeking. Not in some distant retreat or divine vision, but here, amidst the dust and clamor. I had found it by turning inward, by remembering what had always been. My soul, the friend who never spoke, and yet always understood. The companion who did not guide with maps, but with presence. The witness who remained when all else moved. The one who dwells eternally in silence, and invites me to do the same. Even now, when I return to that memory, I see no grand miracle. Only a man sitting beneath an arch in a crowded place, remembering how to be still. But in that stillness, the entire world shifted. And I learned, perhaps for the first time, that you do not need to silence the world to find peace. You only need to listen until the silence within becomes louder than the noise outside. And when it does, you will know your soul again, not as an idea, but as the most faithful friend you have ever known. He came to me at dusk, the young man, breathless with the kind of agitation that wears itself like a second skin. His eyes darted around the courtyard before settling on mine, and though he said nothing at first, the air around him was loud with questions, thick with the aching weight of unspoken pain. I recognized it instantly, not the pain of injury, nor the sorrow of loss, but something more elusive, more persistent. It was the pain of disconnection. The kind that arises when the mind no longer trusts its own thoughts and the heart cannot remember the path back to stillness. I saw in his face the torment of a soul not lost, but unheard. That particular suffering, of being surrounded by the world yet deaf to one's own inner voice, is one I knew well. It is the condition of many who live only on the surface, never venturing beneath the waves of their own being. He stepped closer, hesitated, then sat cross-legged on the stone floor in front of me as though asking for refuge, though no such word left his lips. His breathing was shallow, rapid. I could feel the pulse of his anxiety from where I sat, like the frantic flutter of a bird caught in a jar. Still, I said nothing. Words would have been too small for what was stirring inside him. Instead, I offered him silence, the most generous thing I could offer in that moment. Not the kind of silence that creates discomfort, but the kind that invites the heart to finally exhale. The kind that says, you don't need to perform here. You don't need to explain. You are already understood, even in your trembling. Eventually, his voice broke through. Not strong, but desperate. I've tried everything, he said. Prayer. Study. Fasting. I've read the holy texts. I've practiced patience. I've even tried denying myself sleep, food, company. But I still feel alone. I still feel noise. I cannot find God in any of it. I cannot find peace. He lowered his gaze after that confession, ashamed perhaps that his sincerity had not brought him the serenity he was promised. I waited, allowing his words to settle like dust in the still air. Then I placed my hand gently on the stone between us and motioned for him to do the same. Slowly, uncertainly, he mirrored my gesture. Our palms pressed to the earth, side by side, not touching, yet deeply connected through the ancient body of the ground that bore us both. Do you feel that? I asked softly. He looked at me, confused. Feel what? The earth, I replied. It says nothing. It does nothing. And yet it holds you. It holds us all. Without it, we are nothing but voices floating in the air. He looked down. His breath slowed, just slightly. I continued. Everything that grows does so from silence. The tree does not speak as it stretches toward the sun. The moon makes no sound as it pulls the tides. Even the child in the womb, closest to God, floats in silence before birth. Why then, I asked gently, do you believe your soul must shout to be heard? He didn't answer, but I saw the seed of understanding planted behind his eyes. I leaned closer, my voice even softer now, as if speaking to the part of him that had not yet forgotten. You were born with a soul, I said, and the soul is the friend of silence. It is not fed by noise. It does not crave answers shouted from mountaintops. It listens for the stillness between breaths. It waits for you beneath every moment. Not above, not beyond, beneath. He closed his eyes. His shoulders, which had been drawn up around his ears like a shield, began to ease downward. I watched as he turned inward, not to retreat, but to return. To descend, slowly, back into the ground of his being, where the soul had waited patiently like a faithful companion left too long in the dark. We remained like that, unmoving, for what might have been a lifetime or only a moment. Around us, the courtyard faded. Voices became distant, shapes blurred. The world thinned to a single presence, the presence that arises when two souls sit in shared stillness. It was not dramatic. There were no visions, no thunderous revelations. But I could feel his breath change, feel his heartbeat soften. And I knew that he, perhaps for the first time in his life, was truly here. Not in the thoughts about here. Not in the judgments, the questions, the philosophies. But in the presence of now. Then came the tears. Quiet at first. Not sobs, but the kind of tears that come from relief, not sorrow. From release. His face remained still, eyes still closed, but the wet tracks formed and slid down his cheeks one by one. I said nothing. The soul needs no translation. It only needs room. Eventually, he opened his eyes. He did not look at me. He looked at the tree behind me, the sky above, the stones beneath us. And I saw that his gaze had changed, not outward, but inward, as though the world was no longer something he was observing, but something he had rejoined. I didn't know it could be like this, he whispered. So simple. So quiet. Yes, I said. The soul does not need you to build towers of thought. It only needs you to sit down beside it and listen. He nodded slowly. He had found the first thread. The rest would come, in time, in silence. And perhaps there would be noise again. He would return to the world. He would forget. But now he had touched something real, something unmoving inside him. And once the soul is remembered, even if for a single breath, it cannot be truly forgotten. As he rose to leave, he turned to me one last time and asked, "What should I do when I feel lost again?" I smiled, not with my lips, but with my being. When the world becomes too loud, I said, go where the soul waits. Sit. Breathe. Do not try to hear anything. Simply let the silence speak. It will not tell you what to do, but it will remind you who you are. He bowed deeply. Not to me, but to the silence. And then he left, not quickly, not slowly, but with the quietness of one who has begun to walk beside something sacred. Something wordless. Something eternal. The days I spent wandering beyond the city walls stretched out like endless tapestries woven from sunlight and shadow, wind and earth. I often found myself drawn to those quiet places where the world seemed to pause, where the hum of life slowed, and the pulse beneath the surface could be felt more clearly. It was not that I sought escape from the city's noise or its demands, but rather a space in which to remember something deeper, something that the clamor of daily life often buried beneath layers of urgency and distraction. On one such day, I followed the whisper of my soul until I came upon a low hill crowned with ancient olive trees, their twisted trunks gnarled like the hands of old sages, their leaves shimmering silver green in the gentle breeze. The valley below stretched wide and open, a quiet sea of branches and earth that seemed to breathe beneath a vast sky painted with soft blues and drifting clouds. I settled beneath one of those venerable trees, its bark rough and familiar beneath my hands, the sun warming the places where it had caressed the trunk. I rested my back against the sturdy wood, feeling the tree's steady presence seep into my bones, and closed my eyes to the world, inviting the silence to fold itself around me like a cloak. This was a silence unlike any other, a silence alive with stillness, not emptiness, vibrant with presence, not void. It was a silence that did not demand I flee from noise, but rather asked me to listen with new ears, to receive with an open heart. As the leaves above whispered their timeless songs to the wind, I breathed deeply and sank into that stillness, allowing the layers of thought, worry, and distraction to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. The experience was transformative, not because it unveiled some secret or revealed a sudden insight, but because it offered me a glimpse into the true nature of the soul. In the stillness beneath that olive tree, I realized how profoundly we misunderstand silence. We fear it, avoid it, fill it with noise because we mistake it for absence, for loneliness, for emptiness. But the soul, I came to know, is not born from sound or action. It is born from silence, the sacred quiet that exists before the first word, before the first breath, before the first heartbeat. It is in this silence that the soul sings its truest song, not in sounds or words, but in the very essence of being itself. I watched a small insect crawl slowly across my foot, moving without hurry or hesitation, fully present in each step. It did not question its path or fear the unknown. It simply existed in harmony with the world around it. In that simple movement, I saw a reflection of the soul's natural state, calm, steady, unburdened by the noise that so often consumes the mind. The soul does not argue or seek to prove itself. It rests in peace because it knows it is already whole. All suffering, I understood, arises when we forget this and begin to live from the chaos of thought instead of the quiet strength of silence. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky with hues of gold and rose, the shadows lengthened, wrapping the earth in a gentle embrace. Yet I felt no urgency to rise, no pull to return to the world of sound and rush. Instead, I sat anchored in that sacred quiet, tethered not to a place but to an inner sanctuary that had quietly welcomed me home. This silence was not a fleeting visitor, it was a constant companion, a wellspring within me that no noise or distraction could diminish. It was a friend that spoke not in words but in presence, a guide that led not by direction but by invitation, to turn inward, to rest, to remember. When I finally stood, brushing the dust from my robes, I did so with a heart lightened and a spirit renewed. I took one last look at the olive tree, stoic and silent against the fading light, and felt a deep gratitude for the timeless lesson it had offered without words. The silence I had found beneath its branches would journey with me, a steady flame within the ever-changing dance of life. No matter where I walked, no matter the noise that sought to claim me, I would carry this quiet voice, the voice of the soul, the friend of silence, guiding me back to myself again and again, like the steady pull of a distant star. And so I moved forward, not away from the world, but into it with new eyes. The olive grove had taught me that silence is not a refuge from life, but the very heart of it. It is where the soul waits patiently, inviting us to rest, to listen, and to remember the deep, unspoken truth, that beneath all noise, beneath all fear and longing, we are already whole, already held, already loved in the quiet embrace of silence. The night had settled over the city with a softness so profound that it felt as though the very air had become a gentle caress. Each breath I drew seemed to mingle with the cool darkness, carrying the delicate scent of jasmine blossoms from nearby gardens and the faint trace of wood smoke drifting on the breeze. The narrow streets lay quiet beneath the dim glow of oil lamps, their flickering flames casting wavering shadows against the ancient stone walls that had witnessed countless generations come and go. It was as if the city itself had exhaled and now rested in a hushed reverence, holding a sacred space for the invisible presence that lingers in the silence between stars. Walking alone through this nighttime sanctuary, I felt the soul's whisper stir inside me, not as words, but as a deep and timeless presence that called me back to myself. Pausing beneath a weathered archway, its stones smooth with the passage of feet and prayers, I allowed the stillness to envelop me. This night's silence was unlike the quiet of daylight. It was heavier, charged with meaning and the weight of countless unspoken truths. In the absence of noise and distraction, the usual clutter of my mind began to fall away like autumn leaves scattered by a soft wind, leaving a vast open space inside. I closed my eyes, not to escape but to listen, not for sound, but for the profound pauses between sounds, for the gentle rhythm of my breath, and for the subtle heartbeat of the earth beneath my feet. Within that boundless space, I found an old and faithful companion, my soul, waiting patiently, not demanding or pleading, but simply present in perfect stillness. Memories surfaced, unbidden and vivid, moments when the world's noise had overwhelmed me, times when fear and doubt clouded my vision and I felt myself slipping away from peace. I saw myself as a younger man, restless and afraid of silence because in its depths lay a vastness I did not yet dare to enter. I remembered nights turned sleepless by the ceaseless spinning of thoughts, the mind weaving elaborate tales of what might come or be lost, stories that kept me captive in cycles of worry and confusion. Yet now, bathed in the cool embrace of night, I understood a truth I had long overlooked. The soul does not fear silence, it embraces it. It is the restless mind that dreads stillness, for silence is the mirror in which truth is revealed without disguise. My thoughts turned to the countless seekers who had walked before me on this path, those who had traversed deserts and mountains, studied sacred texts, and sat in countless assemblies of sages and mystics. Many found guidance in words, rituals, and stories told under flickering flames. Yet I had come to know that the deepest wisdom is beyond the reach of language and intellect. It is discovered in the silence that holds all that cannot be spoken, the ineffable presence of the divine, the eternal whisper within every fleeting moment. The soul is the friend of silence because silence is the sacred ground upon which the soul's voice rises, unshackled from words, concepts, and noise. Opening my eyes slowly, I lifted my gaze to the heavens visible through the lattice of branches overhead. The stars glimmered softly, ancient and distant, their light a gentle pulse of life in the vast void. They spoke in silence, each a radiant beacon born from the darkness, testifying to the mystery that permeates all existence. In their quiet brilliance, I felt an unspoken kinship, a thread connecting me to the infinite sky above and the solid earth beneath my feet, woven by the very silence that holds all creation together. In that timeless moment, the city around me ceased to exist as separate stones, streets, and shadows. Instead, it became a living, breathing entity, exhaling slowly in rhythm with the night. I was no longer a solitary figure wandering through empty lanes, but a participant in the eternal dance between presence and absence, sound and silence, form and formlessness. The soul's friend, the silence, revealed itself not as an absence but as the very foundation of life itself, the sacred pause that holds the symphony of existence in harmonious balance. Resuming my walk beneath the stars, my steps fell gentle and deliberate, each one carrying the stillness I had touched deep within me. The night no longer felt empty or dark, it was alive with presence, full of possibility. The silence of the soul became a refuge and a guide, a wellspring of peace flowing quietly beneath the surface of the world's clamor. No matter where my path led, whatever challenges awaited, I knew I could return to that silent place inside me, to the friend who waits without judgment or demand, who listens with endless patience and holds me in the tender embrace of being. As I moved through the sleeping city, I was keenly aware that silence is not merely a pause between sounds, but the sacred cradle in which all life begins and ends. It is the place where the heart finds rest beyond pain, where the mind softens beyond doubt, where the spirit dances free of all burdens. The soul's friendship with silence is an invitation to return home, over and over again, to the unshakable truth beneath the fleeting illusions of the world. And so I walked beneath the infinite canopy of stars, carrying the quiet flame within me like a treasured secret. In the heart of silence, I had discovered not emptiness, but fullness beyond measure, a fullness that holds us all, that speaks in the language of breath and stillness, and that reminds us, in every moment, that we are never truly alone. There was a time in my youth when I believed that the silence of the soul was a distant land, a sacred realm reserved only for those who could sever themselves completely from the world's distractions. I imagined it existed far away, atop snow-capped mountains, in the depths of vast deserts, or inside darkened caves where the wind itself dared not enter. To me, silence was something to be sought through renunciation, through hardship, through great sacrifice, the privilege of the ascetic, the hermit, the mystic who abandoned all that was worldly and familiar. I thought the soul's friend was a rare visitor, glimpsed only by those who dared to face solitude's harshness and the sting of loneliness. The idea of silence as a constant, faithful companion felt beyond reach, like a distant star too faint to guide a wandering traveler home. But with time, through wandering the bazaars and gardens, through teaching and sitting quietly among seekers, I came to see that this was a great misunderstanding. The soul's friend, the silence, is neither remote nor scarce. It is not confined to cloisters or hidden retreats, but is present everywhere, woven through the very fabric of existence, waiting patiently to be recognized. It is as near as the breath moving softly in and out of my body, as close as the brief pause between two words, as intimate as the fragile space between heartbeats. It does not demand grand gestures or exile. It requires only our willingness to stop, to listen, to be still. I remember vividly a moment when this truth revealed itself with astonishing clarity. I was amidst a lively festival, a celebration filled with music, dance, and the vibrant colors of joy. The streets overflowed with people, their faces alight with laughter, their bodies swaying in ecstatic rhythm to the drumbeats and flutes. The air was thick with the aroma of spices and rosewater, voices rising and falling like waves in an endless sea of sound. At first, the noise felt overwhelming, a tempest that threatened to drown the quiet within me. But instead of fleeing, I chose to remain, to be fully present, to listen beneath the din rather than to the din itself. Amidst the whirl of revelry, I found a stillness within, untouched by the music and laughter swirling all around me. It was a silence not of absence but of profound presence, a calm center, vast and unshaken, holding the celebration gently like the eye holds the storm. In that sacred space, the soul became as tangible as a close friend seated beside me. It did not speak aloud or call for attention. It simply was, a constant, unwavering thread weaving through the tapestry of life's experience. This friend of silence showed me that true peace does not come from escaping the world's noise, but from carrying the quiet center within, even when surrounded by chaos. The soul's silence is the deep well that listens while the world shouts, the stillness that supports the rushing river. It is the inner sanctuary that remains unshaken by passing storms. I have seen this silence reflected in others, the gentle gaze of one who has learned patience, the peaceful smile of one who does not cling to worldly troubles, the steady breath of those who rest in presence despite the turmoil around them. I have witnessed it in the uninhibited joy of children at play, who embrace the quiet pauses between laughter without fear or impatience. I have felt it in the quiet dignity of the elders, whose eyes hold the wisdom of many lifetimes and the calm certainty of one who knows the depths of stillness. This silence is not an empty void but a fullness that overflows, a boundless ocean in which the soul floats, buoyed and free. There are times when the mind is a raging storm of worry, when the heart is heavy with longing, and when the world's demands press in like unrelenting tides. In such moments, silence may seem distant or lost, buried beneath layers of distraction, fear, and noise. But it is never truly gone. It waits like a faithful friend, patient, non-judgmental, always present, ready to receive us when we are willing to pause and turn inward. To find that silence, we need not journey to distant lands or renounce the world. We need only stop, breathe, and listen to ourselves, to the moment, to the stillness beneath the surface of noise. This silence is a wellspring, the sacred ground from which all true understanding, love, and compassion flow. It is where the soul speaks most clearly, not with words, but in the language of presence, peace, and being. It is the place where the mind's endless chatter quiets, where the eternal whisper of the divine can be heard, pure and unfiltered. The soul's friend is not a distant deity or an abstract ideal, but the living stillness that dwells within each of us, the silent witness to every joy and sorrow, the quiet heart that beats beneath the noise of life. Thus, I return time and again to this friend, this silence, not as a place to escape but as a sanctuary to carry within my heart always. In moments of solitude and in crowds, in laughter and in tears, in motion and in rest, the soul's companion waits, patient, gentle, unwavering. It is the golden thread that weaves through the fabric of life, the light that shines brightest in the darkest night, the quiet space that makes all sound and meaning possible. This is the silence I have come to know. The friend I trust with all that I am. The home I carry wherever my feet may wander, through the ever-turning cycles of joy and sorrow, presence and absence, sound and silence. In its embrace, I find my true self again and again, whole, free, and at peace. The moment when the true nature of the soul's companionship with silence unfolded before me was not marked by fanfare or a sudden revelation. It was quiet, subtle, and profound, a gentle awakening that came in the fragile hours just before dawn, when the world itself hangs suspended between the darkness of night and the promise of day. I sat alone in my chamber, the faint flicker of a single candle casting long, wavering shadows upon the ancient stone walls. Outside, the city lay hushed beneath a blanket of sleep, the streets empty except for the whisper of a soft breeze weaving through the trees and the distant murmur of the river winding its endless course. It was a sacred pause, a fragile moment pregnant with possibility, and within that delicate stillness, I felt the presence of silence not as an absence but as a living, breathing companion, intimate, near, and endlessly patient. That silence was no void. It was rich and deep, carrying within it the memory of every sound that had ever graced the night, the rustle of olive branches stirred by the wind, the quiet prayers offered beneath the stars, the soft footsteps of travelers long since gone. It held all the whispers of the past and the soft promises of the future, condensed into a vast, unbroken stillness that seemed to enfold the entire cosmos within its quiet embrace. In that profound silence, I sensed the true home of the soul, the place beyond all illusions, beyond time and space, where only essence remains, pure, unspoken, eternal. As I breathed deeply, becoming aware of the slow rise and fall of my own breath, I felt a sacred rhythm unfolding, a dance between the outer world and the inner sanctuary where the soul resides. Each inhale drew me closer to that silent friend who had been waiting patiently from the beginning, ever ready to welcome me home. Each exhale released the tension, fear, and doubt that had clung stubbornly to my heart, like shadows reluctant to yield to the dawn. The breath itself became a bridge, sacred and steady, uniting the restless mind with the quiet wellspring of being within. In that rhythm, a timeless truth revealed itself: silence is not something to be chased or grasped beyond ourselves. It is the friend who walks beside us in every moment, the gentle presence beneath all sound, the quiet hand that guides us back to wholeness when we have strayed into confusion and noise. In reflecting on my life's journey, I recalled countless moments when the clamorous world had overwhelmed me, the bustling bazaars filled with shouting merchants, the earnest debates of scholars, the inner turmoil stirred by restless thoughts. Each time, beneath the surface, silence had been there, waiting without complaint or reproach, ready to receive me whenever I was willing to stop, to pause, to listen. I realized then that the soul's friendship with silence is not a distant or rare blessing, but an ever-present invitation extended to each of us in every breath. It requires nothing from us but the willingness to turn inward, to rest in stillness, and to allow the endless chatter of the mind to soften and fade. This silence is a sacred wellspring from which all true understanding and love flow. It is the foundation beneath the shifting sands of emotion and thought, the source of clarity amidst confusion, the anchor that steadies the heart amid life's tempests. It is where the soul speaks most clearly, not through words or doctrines, but in the profound language of presence and peace. The soul's friend is no distant deity or lofty abstraction, but the living, breathing stillness dwelling within each of us, a silent witness to all our joys and sorrows, a tender presence holding us with unwavering love. From that dawn forward, I sought to cultivate this friendship, to honor the silence within as a sacred guest, and to cherish its gentle presence as a source of strength, wisdom, and renewal. I learned that true companionship does not depend on constant activity or the clamor of words, but flourishes in quiet spaces where trust, understanding, and love grow. In silence, the soul finds its truest expression, not in grand declarations or elaborate philosophies, but in the humble, profound act of being fully present to the moment, to ourselves, and to the divine mystery that suffuses all existence. I came to understand that silence is not the absence of life, but its deepest essence. It is the sacred pause that holds the music of the spheres, the still heart beating beneath the surface of the storm, the breath that animates all beings. The friendship with silence invites us into a sacred intimacy with our own souls, allowing us to witness the unfolding of life with gentle attentiveness and open hearts. It teaches patience when the world is chaotic, courage when fear threatens, and compassion when judgment arises. It is the quiet force that transforms suffering into peace, confusion into clarity, separation into unity. And so, wherever I go, in moments of solitude and in the midst of crowds, in laughter and tears, in the quiet dawn and the restless noon, I carry this friend within me. The silence that waits without condition, loves without demand, and reveals without disguise. It is the golden thread woven through the tapestry of my life, the light that shines brightest in the darkest night, the gentle space where all voices find their harmony. This is the friend I trust, the silence that embraces me wholly, without reservation or end. In its embrace, I have found the true home of my soul, the eternal refuge where I am always free to be. There was a time, not so long ago in the unfolding of my days, when I regarded silence as merely the absence of sound, a barren space where nothing moved or stirred. I thought it was emptiness, a void where life paused and waiting for noise to return. But as the years stretched on, through long journeys and many moments of solitude, I came to see that silence is far more profound than mere quiet. It is not a hollow emptiness, but a living presence, a sacred companion that walks faithfully alongside the soul in every breath, every moment of existence. Silence is not the enemy of speech, nor the rival of action. Rather, it is their truest friend, the invisible stage upon which the entire drama of life unfolds, the still ground from which every word and movement arises and returns. This understanding was not sudden but slow and deep, like the gentle dawn gradually dispelling the dark night. It came through hours spent beneath the vast, patient sky, gazing at the stars that pierce the twilight with their tender light. On one such evening, the world was hushed, not dead, but alive in its quietude. The air was cool and carried the faint, familiar murmur of the city retreating into rest, mingled with the soft rustle of olive leaves stirred by a whispering breeze. I sat alone, closing my eyes, surrendering to the embrace of that silence, not as a separate thing from me but as an intimate presence, the very fabric of my own being. In that surrender, I felt boundaries dissolve, the hard edges between myself and the world softened and blurred until they seemed to vanish entirely. The silence that held me then was not empty space but a deep well, a quiet river flowing beneath the storm of thoughts and worries. In that stillness, I glimpsed the soul's true nature. The soul, I realized, is rooted in this silence, nourished by it, sustained through it. It is the fertile soil from which grow love, wisdom, and compassion, the very essence of our being. When we resist silence, when we rush to fill every moment with noise and distraction, we starve the soul, causing it to fragment and wander lost in the outer world, endlessly chasing peace where it cannot be found. But when we return to silence, when we lean into the quiet within, we reconnect with our deepest selves, whole, unshaken, and at rest beyond the reach of the world's turmoil. I have seen this truth reflected in the eyes of those who have learned to live with presence, the calm gaze of a teacher who listens not just with ears but with heart, the gentle hands of a healer who holds pain without flinching, the quiet smile of one who rests in being rather than doing. These souls carry silence as their closest friend. They do not fear the quiet but welcome it as a wellspring of strength and clarity. I have also watched children, innocent and unburdened, who move naturally between play and pause, who understand without words that silence is not the enemy of joy but its companion, a sacred space where wonder and delight take root. Yet life's storms are inevitable. There are times when the world presses in with relentless demands, when the mind races with fear and doubt, and the heart grows heavy with longing or grief. In such times, silence may seem lost or unreachable, buried beneath layers of noise, confusion, and distraction. But silence never truly disappears. It waits patiently, like a faithful friend who never abandons us, who stands quietly at the edge of our awareness, inviting us to pause, to breathe, to turn inward. To listen, not with the ears alone, but with the heart and soul. In this listening, we find refuge beyond words, a sanctuary where the soul can rest, heal, and remember its true home. This silence is the friend who never leaves, who does not judge or demand, but holds us tenderly through joy and sorrow alike. It is the ground beneath life's shifting waves, the still center in the swirling dance of existence. To know this friend is to know a peace beyond human understanding, a peace that carries us through the darkest nights and the brightest days, through pain and pleasure, loss and renewal. It is the unshakable foundation upon which our lives are built, even when the storms rage and the earth trembles. And so, I carry this silence within me always. It is my companion in solitude and in company, in speech and in quiet, in rest and in movement. It teaches me patience with myself and with others, reminding me that all things unfold in their own time, and that I need not rush or force what is not yet ready. It teaches me to trust the mysterious flow of life, to find joy in the simple act of being, fully present in each moment, whether filled with sound or stillness. In silence, the soul speaks its deepest truths, not in words, but in the language of presence, love, and being. This friendship, sacred and eternal, is the treasure I cherish most. It is the thread woven through the tapestry of my life, the light that shines brightest in the darkest night, the gentle space where all voices find their harmony and where I am always whole, free, and at peace. The moment of understanding that dawned upon me was not sudden, but a gradual unfolding, like the slow opening of a flower greeting the sun's gentle warmth after a long, cold night. I realized, deeply and irrevocably, that the friendship between the soul and silence is not a mere whisper lost in the noise of life, nor a fleeting escape sought in moments of solitude. It is the very essence of existence itself, the unbroken rhythm that beats beneath all things, the sacred current that flows endlessly through the tapestry of being. This truth was not taught to me through words alone, but revealed through experience, through the rise and fall of days and nights, through the dance of joy and sorrow, through moments of laughter and tears, through the stillness found in nature's embrace and the clamoring silence within my own heart. One evening, as I sat beneath the vast canopy of a centuries-old tree, its branches spreading wide like a protective embrace, the leaves murmured softly in the cool breeze, and the sky above stretched infinitely, dark yet studded with stars that shimmered like distant flames. Beneath me, the earth felt steady and true, grounding me in its timeless strength. In that perfect union of earth and sky, light and shadow, movement and stillness, I sensed the profound unity that silence brings, a space where all dualities converge and dissolve. It is the place where day meets night, where sound meets stillness, where form meets the formless. Silence is the quiet heart that beats within the chaos and confusion of existence, the invisible thread weaving together every fragment of life into a seamless whole. Within this silent heart, I found the true nature of the soul, not as something separate or isolated, but as a radiant reflection of the divine mystery that flows through every corner of creation. The soul's friend, silence, is the mirror in which we can see ourselves clearly, stripped of all illusions, distractions, and pretenses. It is the gentle teacher who speaks not through words or doctrines, but through presence, an ever-patient guide that draws us home when we have lost our way in the clamor of the world. I reflected on the countless times I had sought answers in the wisdom of others, in sacred texts, in the words of sages, in the rites and ceremonies of tradition, only to discover that the deepest truth eluded capture by intellect or speech. It dwells instead in the silent spaces between thoughts, in the sacred pauses between breaths, in the profound stillness beneath the restless surface of the mind. To know this silence is to know a peace that surpasses human understanding, a peace that embraces our imperfections, doubts, and fears with unconditional love and compassion. Embracing this realization transformed the way I moved through the world. Silence was no longer something distant or reserved for secluded moments. It became a constant companion in every breath and every step. It lived in the laughter of children as they played without hurry, in the gentle kindness of strangers whose eyes spoke volumes without uttering a word, in the quiet moments shared between friends where words fell away and hearts spoke directly. Silence was the steady presence that anchored me during turbulent times, the calm in the eye of emotional storms, the subtle light illuminating the shadowed paths of uncertainty. I came to understand that nurturing this friendship demands patience and reverence, like tending a fragile flame that can easily be extinguished by the winds of distraction, haste, or fear. It calls for intentional moments of stillness, for turning inward to listen deeply without judgment or expectation. It asks for courage to embrace the unknown, the unseen, and the unsaid, to relinquish control and surrender to life's unfolding mystery. In this surrender, we open ourselves to the profound intimacy of silence, the sacred space where the soul meets the divine in a dance beyond time and form, a communion without words. This friendship with silence is the most precious gift I have received and the greatest treasure I can offer to others. It is the wellspring from which compassion flows freely, the root from which creativity and wisdom blossom, the refuge where the weary heart finds rest and renewal. Through silence, we discover the truth that we are never truly alone. We are held eternally by a presence greater than ourselves, a boundless love that knows no limits or conditions. So, as I continue to walk this path of life, I carry this friend within me, the silence that speaks without words, listens without interruption, and holds me with unwavering grace. In its embrace, I find the courage to face each moment fully and without fear, the humility to accept all that is with an open heart, and the joy to celebrate the eternal mystery of being. This is the home of the soul, the sacred space where all journeys begin and end, the eternal refuge calling me back, again and again, to the quiet heart of existence itself. It is in this sanctuary of silence that I find myself reborn, whole, free, and at peace beyond measure, resting eternally in the gentle arms of the divine.